Okay, I've done a couple versus battles on this channel. I think I did Naruto versus Bleach, Demon Slayer versus Jujutsu Kaisen, and Black Clover versus My Hero Academia. So I was thinking, what shows are just similar enough to where I could do a somewhat equal versus battle? And I was like, Death Note and Code Geass, they get compared all the time, at least to my knowledge. I've had many conversations with people talking about Code Geass and Death Note, and they always seem to be, I guess it's because their main characters are very similar in terms of just how good they are. You know, both top tier and both very, very smart, maniacal, devious. So I mean, I thought this was a great comparison to do. So before I hop into it, if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. Like, it's getting very annoying at this point. You know, it's just like, just do it. We wear Nike here. It's okay. I'm gonna be looking at a couple of things. Obviously, I'm gonna be looking at the main character. I'm gonna be looking at the soundtrack, story, side characters, environment. I'm gonna be looking at many things. You know, I'm just gonna sort of deduce which one I personally think is the best show out of the two, because they are fairly close. They are fairly close. So I mean, let's hop into it. Just starting off, first I'm gonna start off with the soundtrack. Now, I feel like off the bat, both shows have a great OST. In terms of just the songs that are going on during the episode, we have the Code Geass OST. I think it's called like Stories or something. That's the top 3 OST of all time for me. Like, I the emotions I felt hearing that, it was something else. Like, it really like makes you feel some type of way. But then you have Death Note with L's theme. That's a classic. Light's theme, another classic. Lots of classics with Death Note. Opening one for Code Geass is top tier. Opening one for Death Note is also top tier. Opening 2 for Death Note is iconic in not necessarily in a sense that it's good, because I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it's intense. It's an intense feeling, you know. It gets you kind of hyped up. You know, Code Geass ending 1, I don't really like that one, but Code Geass ending 2, that's a banger. But it's not touching Death Note ending 1. It's just not. I don't remember if Death Note had a second ending, but I just do know that Death Note ending 1 is probably in a top 3 of my favorite endings of all time. Like, it's just, aside from the visuals, because the visuals are great for this one too, this guy's voice is just like, there's something there. I don't know what it is, but it really gets me like deep into thought, this ending. So I mean, if we're comparing soundtracks, as I said, there's L's theme, there's many different I think Death Note has a slight edge over Code Geass, and I'm not saying Code Geass has bad overall soundtrack. It's just like Death Note is really good with the music, man. Really good with the music. It doesn't miss. It's a rarity for Death Note to miss with the music. Code Geass has definitely missed with a couple of its soundtracks for sure. If we're looking at the story as a whole, I mean, both are they're just absolutely, it's like a mixture of, there's just so much shit going on in both stories. If we take a look at Death Note, the first half was definitely stronger than the second. That's for sure. That's 100%. The first half of Death Note was some of the best fiction I think I've ever watched. But then the second half, while it's not bad, it goes from like an S tier to a B tier. Code Geass, on the other hand, having a phenomenal first season, continues to have a phenomenal second season. I personally thought Code Geass was great. I think it got better throughout. I think it just kept getting better over time, and it just kept getting more and more crazy. You know what I mean? And I don't think Code Geass really fell off as hard as Death Note Season 2 fell off. So in terms of the whole story, I feel like the Code Geass story, while both are complete, I feel like the Code Geass story is more fulfilling. Because they both, spoiler territory if you haven't seen either show, I'm saying some shit right now, they both relatively end the same, with the main character dying. It's just with the fact that in the end cutscene, you have Lelouch driving away in the carriage, so he's basically alive, but he's never obviously brought up again. Like, there's never been a continuation of the series, so we never really get to see that. But basically, both of the stories end in a very similar fashion, not in the way that things happen, but what actually happens. But I mean, Light's death was such a, I mean, what a fucking scene that was. That's like an iconic top 5 scene. Like, that really, the whole staircase thing and like the symbolism going on and everything, it was really good. And like with Ryuk sitting there laughing, and like, it was just beautiful. It was so beautiful. It was so, I don't know. I actually don't know who I'm gonna give it to, because I mean, the plot twist and just the twists and turns that Death Note had, comparing it to Code Geass, I mean, Code Geass had some shit though. Like the Euphemia obliteration that Lelouch had her do, I mean, that was ridiculous. That was literally insane. I was like, no way that actually just happened. And just the whole thing with like him fighting his dad and like all that shit. I don't know, man. It was really crazy with Code Geass. Death Note was cool. I mean, Death Note was great. But the whole Nier thing, like, it made sense. It just didn't hit the same like L, you know? It was like if they had Nier first and then L, maybe. But then maybe would have liked Nier more. Because it seemed like a step down. Even though he was like, I guess you could say smarter, or he had more information at his hands compared to L, who was like trying to figure this out as he went. So I don't know. But I think in terms of the story, I may have to give it to Code Geass. Slightly though. Very slight. It's very, very slight. But I think I'm going to have to give it to Code Geass. Now, if we're looking at the main characters, this shit is hard. This is a hard versus battle. This is a very hard versus battle because it's like, because we have Lelouch, who is an absolute madman. Very smart. Both of them are smart. But in terms of a battle sense, he has, you know, he's in the midst of battle. Light's fighting a psychological battle while Lelouch is also fighting a psychological battle, but it's physical as well. You know, there's no mechs in Death Note. There's no guns like that. And like, you know, there's a lot more going on. It's a lot more like physical fighting and warfare going on in Code Geass. Lelouch is like playing a chess game, and it's emphasized a lot in the show. And it's like a symbolic type of chess game that Lelouch is playing, moving his pieces, trying to coordinate things going on. Light, on the other hand, is like playing a solo. It's sort of like, let me think. What's a good comparison to make? Light's playing like a game of Among Us. That's the best thing I could think of. He's the imposter, but he has to do his best to conceal himself. And then while Lelouch is also like, you know, he's trying to not get his identity found as well. Don't get me wrong. But it's like he is also coordinating a whole army of people to do his bidding for him. Light's solo dolo. So there's a difference with that. So in terms of being smarter, I feel like Light is in a more difficult position than Lelouch. Because it's like Lelouch can just look at someone. Obviously there are the people with the Geass powers and whatever. But like any normal person, Lelouch, like if they find out that he is Zero or whatever, he could just look at them and be like, you don't know who I am, or you do this for me, whatever the fuck. You know? If Light doesn't know your name, he doesn't know your name, and there's literally nothing he could do until he knows your name. So I feel like Light is in a harder position than Lelouch is. I'm not trying to say Lelouch is not smart, because Lelouch is up here in terms of his intellect. But I feel like Light just has to do a bit more to really conceal himself. And I feel like it is harder for him than it is for Lelouch, considering Lelouch also has people like Cece helping him out, and he has people backing him. While Light has people help him by deceiving them, but like Lelouch either tells people what to do by the Geass, or he actually has people helping him that he didn't even deceive like that. He just like, they are his followers. So overall, but just taking that out of the equation, I mean, overall as a character, I mean, we got a kid who went to high school, thinks he could change the world, rid of all evil, and become basically the god. And then we have Lelouch, who is given this power. He acquired it somewhere, whatever. But he acquires his power, which he is now. What is even his goal? I'm trying to remember. What's Lelouch's goal? So his overall goal was to end all war and usher an age of peace. But he also wanted to kill his father, the Emperor, who abandoned him and his crippled sister Nunnally after the assassination of their mother. All in all, they kind of wanted the same thing, but were doing different things to get there. And I feel like in terms of Light, I feel like his task was harder. No, I mean, but Lelouch was also going up against dudes with this power. Not his specific power, but like, you know, they had Geass. So, I mean, this is hard. I may have to leave this one up to the comments. I don't know. I think I may like Lelouch a little bit more. A little bit more. I think I like Lelouch a little bit more. I think Light's journey and what he had to deal with was harder. But I feel like just as a character overall, Light, like if I want to hang out with one of them knowing everything that they've done, right? Knowing everything that they've done, and I'm like, and someone pulls up to me and they're like, pick one person to just hang out with and chill. I'm picking Lelouch. I don't want to hang out with Light because I know like while both of them are thinking all this shit all the time and whatever. I know Lelouch can deceive me by just pulling out the GEASS and doing whatever. It's just like Light is like a scary individual. I don't know. There's something about him that I just like it. He's like creepy, you know. I'm picking Lelouch, just barely though. I'm giving Lelouch the edge. No, I mean if we're looking at side characters in Code Geass, we got Callan, Nunnally, Euphemia, Suzaku, Nina Einstein, a couple of people from Lelouch's army. I think I said Nunnally already. I think that's about it. I know there are like some people who help him as well, but I feel like that's like the main cast, you know. And then in Death Note, I mean we have Misa, we have the guy at the end who was going psycho. I forgot his name. But then we have L, Nier. Well, do they count as side characters? I mean, there's Misa, that guy, Light's dad, Ryuk. Ryuk is a great character. I don't know. I feel like the side characters in Death Note had more impact on the story than the side characters in Code Geass. Suzaku, great. And like I know we're going after Nunnally the whole time, trying to make her see or whatever, or make her walk, whatever he was trying to do. And I know Cece's there a lot, but a lot of the time Cece is just there. You know, a lot of the time Cece is just there. I know she has a great impact, but a lot of the time she's just like eating pizza, just chilling, overseeing. You know, Callan, she was MVP the whole time. The wife right there, you know. Callan, MVP, Suzaku, he was cool too. He was basically the antagonist to Lelouch, but he was also a side character as well. But no, so I feel like the Death Note side characters though, while there may have been less, I feel like they held a bit more weight to the story and what happened in the story than the side characters in Code Geass. So if we're talking about it like that, I feel like I'm gonna give it to Death Note. Again, a little bit. These are very close for me. Very close. Very comparable shows, I feel like. But yeah, I'm gonna give it to Death Note a little bit with that. Now the antagonist of the show. Death Note, we got L and Nier, right? Roughly. I know Light's going up against everyone, but like, you know, the main antagonist, L and Nier. I mean, L is like number one up there of like all time. You know, Code Geass. I mean, Suzaku. The dynamic Lelouch and Suzaku have, I wouldn't call it like an antagonist type of deal. You know, it was like Suzaku happened to be his enemy and they didn't even know it, I'm pretty sure, at like one point in the story, and then he figured it out and they were going against each other. So I guess yes, he was like an antagonist. And then there was Lelouch's dad as well. And then there were a couple other like minor ones, like his brother, I think. Nina was also an antagonist at the time. There were a couple villains. But I mean, I feel like none of them really step up to the plate like L. You know, L is like another level, and then Nier is good. I'm not trying to take any, like, Nier is not bad, but he's just not L. You know, it's just like that step down. You know, it's like they tried doing something there, and I understand it because he's like his protege type of deal, but it's just it wasn't hitting the same as L. That dynamic that Light and L had, it was very, very like rivalry, and it was good. It was really good to watch. It was great to see. But I think I'm gonna give Death Note the antagonist just because there's really no one that I like in Code Geass like L. You know, they have some good antagonists. They do. But it's just no one's even close to that level for me. You know, Code Geass was more so of like a Lelouch chess match, while Death Note was like Light versus the world and all of his fucking, and like all the main guys that stepped up to him, such as L and Nier. So is there really anything else that I have to go off of right now, or is that really it? Animation's another thing, and I feel like the old school art style of Death Note makes it better overall. Just off the bat, like I'm thinking about it, Code Geass, their animation style is very weird to me because those characters are very skinny and they have big heads, especially Lelouch. Lelouch has like one of the skinniest frames I've ever seen on a character ever. But no, in terms of animation, just Death Note is really dark and grimy, and it really fits what the show is trying to portray. You know, it gets it down to a T, and the colors that are used, and just like the grayness of the show and the darkness, it really, really does a good job of like conveying that emotion. So I think animation by default is going to have to go to Death Note. I'm sure Code Geass has better like visually appealing moments because they just battle a lot, but I feel like as a whole, Death Note's just gonna take that one for me. So let's see what we got. We have soundtrack Death Note, we have animation Death Note, we have side characters Death Note, antagonist, and then Code Geass, main character, story, and lastly, just talking about overall enjoyment. You know, because I think a show could have a better story than another show, but it really just depends on how much I enjoyed a specific show. And if we're looking at Death Note and Code Geass, Death Note I watched in early high school. Code Geass I watched about mid high school, so roughly around the same time. The thing is with Code Geass, I watched a lot of it while I was on vacation, so I feel like I really didn't get to digest it in the same way I was able to watch Death Note. And I feel like overall enjoyment, Death Note kind of had me really encapsulated in just like the whole idea of the show. And Code Geass was more so I was sitting there getting shocked at each plot twist, but there were more boring moments of the show. Because when everything wrapped up for Code Geass, that's when I was like, oh shit. You know, and that there were like, obviously there were the moments. Like, as I said, the Euphemia thing and like the Nina table thing, I was like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, this is crazy. There are obviously many moments in Code Geass, like plot twisty moments, but in terms of overall enjoyment, I was never necessarily bored with Death Note. You know, the Nier thing, I never said I was bored with. I just didn't like it as much as the L thing. The beginning of the Nier thing, that was probably like the worst section of Death Note, but I would say in terms of overall enjoyment, I just enjoyed the theming and what that show was a little bit more than Code Geass, but it's very slight though. It's very slight. I think Code Geass had a well put together story, a little bit better than Death Note in terms of just how complicated it was, and in terms of how many different factors there were in the Code Geass story compared to the Death Note story. The Death Note story seemed very linear to me with a lot of different points of like twist, you know, but it was like a straight line. But the Code Geass was more so of like a tree branch type of deal, and there were a lot of different things going on, and I personally am a fan of that, and I like that a lot. There were a lot of moments during my Code Geass watch through that were hard to understand, which made the experience not as enjoyable at times, which you are gonna get, you know, with the story that complicated. It's not like crazy complicated, but you know, there's a lot of things going on with a lot of different characters. So with a story like that, there are going to be moments where you're like sitting there slightly confused as to like what's going on or what's about to happen, and then you figure it out and it's like, oh, okay. Death Note, I never really was in question of that. I was more so in question of like, what the fuck is Light about to do, and just anticipating. So I would say my overall enjoyment was probably going to be Death Note. And with that being said, that's like 5-2, and Death Note is probably going to take the W on this one, you know, but it could really go either way. It really could go either way. I mean, as I said, Code Geass, top tier main character who I like slightly more, and a story that I do like slightly more. But I mean, Death Note has that soundtrack. They have that animation, their side characters, and the villain, or not villain, antagonist, top tier, and that it was a full-on enjoyable experience. I would suggest watching both if you haven't. I don't know why you would have watched this video if you haven't seen them, but I mean, who am I to tell you what to do? I don't. That's not my place, you know. But put your opinion in the comments. Suggest another versus battle. I haven't done one of these in a while. I thought this was a great comparison to do. Death Note on top, just slightly. Shout out to Code Geass. Wonderful show as well. But yeah, on to the next one. Subscribe to the fucking channel, man.